What if? What if Samuel didn't listen and do as the Lord had requested? What if Samuel didn't listen to the Lord and anointed Eliab because he was the oldest, the strongest, and the most obvious candidate to be king? What if Samuel just went off and did his own thing? What if Jesus, as he passed by, did not see and notice the blind man sitting there begging? What if the disciples didn't ask the question, wanting to know what Jesus, the rabbi, the teacher, had to say about the matter? What if the blind man did not do what Jesus asked him to do? What if? What if we do not live as children of the light, as St. Paul calls us, thereby producing every kind of goodness, righteousness, and truth? What if we do not learn the ways of Jesus and choose the fruitless ways of darkness that keep us blind to the true light, Jesus Christ? What if? Every day, we get to choose. There are moments throughout the day when we get to choose. We get to choose between sight and blindness, light and darkness, good and evil, freedom and slavery. What if we react in a way so many people do today? They push Jesus away. Jesus stretched out his hands and smeared clay on the blind man's eyes. What if they would have said, "What the heck are you doing? Get out of my space, dude. Back off. You have no right to touch me and tell me what to do." What if? Our readings are overwhelmingly beautiful and challenging. They are a gift from Mother Church to all of us, and most especially to the elect who are preparing for the Easter sacraments. The elect are icons for us, helping us to see in their journey our own journey from the darkness of original sin to the light of new life in baptism, from being lost in sin to being found, from death to new life, from ashes to new fire. The imagery of being blind and sent to the pool of Siloam is deeply baptismal. Touched by Jesus and washed in the waters of baptism, the elect will be reborn and have a spiritual eyesight and insight that only God can give them. Tomorrow at the 9:30 Mass, I will ask them if they are ready. They're really ready to follow Jesus. Awake, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will be your light. For many years, I was blind to many of the gifts that God had given me. I was very shy and afraid as a kid. I lacked self-confidence. I would not take risks. My father wound was too painful to deal with. Unfortunately, that wound often showed up in ways that were hurtful to others and kept me isolated and lonely. In trying to protect myself from being hurt, I hurt others. Hurt people. Hurt people. Thanks be to God, Jesus kept making mud and putting it on my eyes. Through the guidance and wisdom of my spiritual directors, my closest friends, and one therapist in particular, I finally washed in the pool of Siloam. It was painful. It took years to see clearly, to heal, and to forgive. And it has been totally worth it. From ashes to new fire. What if, when you are asked to give testimony and witness to your Catholic faith, you shy away, you hem and haw, or dance around the issue, or even deny the teachings of the Church? What if, when you are challenged about being a disciple of Jesus Christ, you respond, I don't know him, like Peter did, rather than the blind man's testimony, he's a prophet? What if, after having a profound experience of inner healing or a profound encounter with Christ, you slowly drift away, become cool and then cold in the practice of your faith, allowing the hot ember to become cold ashes? What if? How will you and I seek new spiritual insight this fourth week of Lent? How will we allow the disciplines of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving to sharpen how we see the world and those around us? How, as a parent, will you guide and teach your children to walk in the light of Jesus Christ and be his disciple? Will prayer as a family be as important as your next meal? When people walk into your home, will they recognize that you are Catholic? As spouses, how can you lead each other to the pool of Siloam to be healed from the blindness of taking one another for granted, or impatience with each other, or for blaming one another, or putting yourself first rather than at the needs of the other? How can we journey from darkness to light, from spiritual blindness to holy sight, from ashes to new fire, through the healing touch of our words and actions towards those we love and those who challenge us? Jesus is our healer, our divine physician, and our lover. Let us dive into his word this week. Let us hear him speak to us in the daily readings at Mass, or through the rice bowl reflections, or at Friday night soup supper in the Stations of the Cross, and the many other Lenten offerings that are available to us. We're halfway through. There are so many graces and blessings awaiting us. This Lent, let us hear the gospel afresh through the guidance of Pope Francis as he challenges us to respond to the cries of the poor and the needy, to be a field hospital church for those who are hurting and on the margins. Let us allow Jesus to find us, to touch us, to bring us from blindness to light, from ashes to new fire.
A long gospel reading. And you know what that means? a long homily. I'm just kidding. Actually, I hope by the end of this homily that you'll want to do what the church says to us, which is communicated through the name of this very day. Laetare, rejoice. Now, remarkably, while it is a long gospel reading, it recounts a very short amount of time in which the man born blind goes from not even knowing who Jesus is to then believing him as the Son of Man and the light of the world. He goes from describing him throughout the gospel as the man Jesus to then professing him as a prophet. And by the end, he proclaims so beautifully, "I do believe, Lord," and worships him. What an amazing moment in his life of faith. And remarkably, during the same amount of time, which is very short, the Pharisees do just the opposite. They become increasingly more blind. They begin by admitting that the miracle took place, then they come to deny that it was a miracle, and finally they expel this man who was cured from their synagogue. Isn't it true for each of us that we can cultivate and grow in the gift of faith that we have received? Or through our negligence, we can become more and more blind to the goodness of God and his call to each of us to experience the fruits of his redemption. I want to share just 2 points with you for how each of us can do our part in cultivating the gift of faith which God has given to us. The first is to look at others with the eyes of Jesus, and the second, to allow Jesus to transform us the way he wants to. So to cultivate and grow in our faith, we have the choice. And these 2 ways are ways that we can choose to do this, to grow in our faith. The first is to look upon others with the eyes of Jesus. We need to purify our sight of one another. The very first words of the gospel are these. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" The disciples were looking at the same person Jesus was looking at, but they weren't seeing the same person Jesus was seeing. The way Jesus looks at people is with great love and understanding. How easy it is for us to pass by people we may have never seen before and make a judgment about their life. Samuel certainly learned this lesson as he met Jesse and his family for the first time. We heard in the first reading that he thought he figured out exactly who the Lord had chosen to be anointed. But the Lord reminds him, not as man sees does God see, because man sees the appearance, but the Lord looks into the heart. The Lord looks into the heart. How easy is it for us to judge others? We need to see instead with the eyes of Jesus. So I want you to remember these prayerful lyrics when you're quickly tempted to judge somebody, which is an easy temptation. Give me your eyes for just 1 second. Give me your eyes so I can see everything that I've been missing. Give me your love for humanity. When we judge like the Pharisees did, it only hurts ourselves and others, even if it's a silent judgment. It's a very easy sin to fall prey to because of our own brokenness, and it can happen so quickly. But if we admit our blindness in humility and honesty, we can allow God to help us to see others as Jesus sees them. The second way to cultivate our faith is this: to allow Jesus to transform you the way he wants to. One thing God wanted to do was become man. God became man, taking on flesh. And this means that we know the way he wanted to touch us and transform us through a fleshly, sensory way. When Jesus healed the blind man's sight, he used clay and spit and rubbed the man's eyes. Could God just as easily have snapped his fingers and the man would have seen? Absolutely, he could have. But instead, Christ touches him and speaks to him. That's the way he wanted to transform him. The blind man actually felt Christ touching him, and he heard his voice. Christ shows through this how he communicates God's grace to us in ways appropriate to our human nature. Jesus wants to reach into our lives, to lower himself to our level, and to touch us. And the Catholic Church, under the constant guidance by the Holy Spirit, has preserved this method of administering God's grace through the sacraments. The priest's words of absolution heard at the end of confession provide the consolation we need to bring the reality of God's forgiveness really home to our hearts. And if we're sunk in sin, we're truly blind to the deeper reality of God's love for us. Sin as true darkness blinds us. It takes away seeing God clearly. And the church says, go to confession at least once a year, especially in the season of Lent. Well, brothers and sisters, now is that time to cast off the deeds of darkness, to admit our blindness, and to gain spiritual sight through hearing those words of absolution after confession. So I encourage you to obey St. Paul's words in the letter to the Ephesians today when he said this: "Try to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. Take no part in the fruitless works of darkness, rather expose them." Because then you can understand best his words. You were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. And there are many other ways of living out this incarnational reality, this fleshly, sensory way. By praying the rosary, especially together as a family, you let the feeling of the rosary beads, the sound of your own voice, and your imaginative reflection on the mysteries of Christ's life to be a way that he can touch your soul. Going to the stations of the cross and using our bodies to reverence Christ's passion as we genuflect at each station of the cross allows him to touch us and redeem us through his passion in ever deeper ways. Or coming to the St. Joseph Chapel, the Adoration Chapel, whenever you can. That's a beautiful way to follow the example of this man born blind and to worship Jesus in the most beautiful way, before him, truly present, looking upon him, seeing him with your own eyes, his very body. Today, the church means what she says. Laetare, rejoice, because we have a very compassionate and loving God who has saved us from sin and death. And we can see this, all of us, with the eyes of faith. He chose to become man, taking on flesh, and then he suffered so to be raised again. Let's do our part to cultivate the gift of faith that he's so lovingly given to us. He's illuminated our lives with it by one, looking upon others with the eyes of Jesus and allowing Jesus to transform us the way that he wants to.